All right. We are live here. Sorry about the shitty camera here. The webcam is really crappy. But this is going to be my review of Dark Side of the Ring, Season 2, Episode 3, The Life and Crimes of New Jack. And I've already explained this before. Vice has been releasing these documentaries about professional wrestlers. Like they did one on Chris Benoit, which I think is their best episode by far. I've already reviewed that. If you guys would like to check that out, be sure to uh, check it out. It's up there. Like I had a hard time editing that. Like Vice, for some reason, likes to, put copyright claims on videos that either discuss this or use a little bit of their clips. So I had to do whatever I could to, you know, get around that. But for this, I'm not going to use any clips. I just figured I'd go live with this. I'm not currently at my computer right now. I'm on my laptop here, so that's why the footage is different. And I have no editing software because this is a Chromebook, which I hate Chromebooks. I really do, and I'm hoping to get some money to buy me a new laptop so that I can stream properly. But nevertheless, let's talk about New Jack. New Jack, for those of you who don't know, New Jack is a very controversial guy in professional wrestling. He's notoriously known for, his gimmick of being a racist black man that beats the shit out of you. Like, that's what he was known for in ECW. Of course, he got his start in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which I have a very funny story to tell you guys about that because New Jack actually came to my town because I always went to Smoky Mountain wrestling matches whenever they came around here. And, I have a very funny story about New Jack, my experience with him. Uh, but nevertheless, Jerome Young, that's his real name. He When he was 5 years old, he witnessed his father. Uh, like they go into his background, like why he is the way he is. Apparently, he came from a very abusive home. When he was 5 years old, his father stabbed his mother and shot her. He was a drunk, and he would do all these awful things in front of New Jack to his mother, and thus that sort of put a drift on his and his mother's relationship, which he calls her a bitch. And near the end, and he explains why he is the way he is. But anyways, he got into the wrestling business uh like in 1994, I believe. That's what they were saying, 94. And his first wrestling promotion that he went to was Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which was ran by Jim Cornette, which Jim Cornette was interviewed in this episode. And Jim Cornette basically brought him in as a heel, him and Mustafa Saeed. They were known as the Gangstas, and their job was to basically come in and draw as much heat as possible. Basically, what heat is a fan's reaction to the heel. The heel is the bad guy, and their job is to get heat, to draw heat from the fans. And New Jack was a very good talker. Like, he could fucking, you know, he can fucking draw heat like there's no tomorrow. Like he would call all of us white people and rednecks and throw all these, he basically fucking trash talk the fans, the audience. And people fucking hated him. Calling him the N-word and all this other shit that people would just throw at him. All these insults, which he was very young in the wrestling business. He didn't know, like he didn't know how to handle that. And I watched a shoot interview with him and Ricky Martin. Well, actually, it was just him. He talked about Ricky Martin. Ricky Martin from the Rock and Roll Express. Ricky Martin basically showed him the ropes of the business. And, Ricky Martin told him, when people insult you, call you the N-word, you can use that as heat. You're doing your job. And he was so upset and offended over that at first, but then he sort of took that to a different level, and he was able to, just get that reaction and get over, because people wanted to see, the bad guy get their upcomings. And, that's why, fans would come to these shows. Now, here's the funny story that I have with New Jack. They came to my town, which I'm from Southeast Kentucky. They came to my town, and I remember, meeting New Jack. I shook his hand. He seemed like a really nice guy. But then I saw a kid, which they even brought this up in the documentary, this story that I'm about to tell you guys in the documentary. There was this kid, I don't remember who it was, though, but this kid walks up to him, he rubs his elbow or something, and, then he, like, wipes his hands, and New Jack is like, "What the fuck are you doing, kid?" And the kid was, like, really scared, and he told New Jack, "Well, my dad told me that, you black people, if we touched you, we would turn black. So that's why I'm wiping, wiping it off." And oh my god, that made him really mad. And I just, I'll never forget that, witnessing that. And, you know, I knew that New Jack was going to be a very controversial figure, and he would probably end up, either in the WWE or ECW or WCW. Well, he ended up going to ECW, which that's where he really got over with the hardcore stuff. That was sort of his forte. Coming into the ring, beating the shit out of you with weapons and jumping off balconies. He didn't do that in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. In Smoky Mountain Wrestling, they put on an act basically, and worked up the crowd and wrestled like a regular wrestler. But New Jack, even in the documentary, he stated that he wasn't happy being in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and that he wanted to evolve his character. He wanted to make his character real. And that is one thing I got to give credit to New Jack for. His character was believable. And to get heat like he could, like nobody else could. Like, he was the only wrestler to get away with, all this racist shit he was spewing and everything else like that. So he took his act to ECW. Him and Mustafa, they went to ECW. They well, actually, before we get into the ECW stuff, they did bring up a story from Smoky Mountain Wrestling where they beat up the Rock and Roll Express. and New Jack sort of lost his voice one time, and he brought a baby doll. Like he bought a baby doll at a store, and he wrapped a rope around the baby doll's neck, and he brought it into the ring, and he pissed off a bunch of people. People were so pissed off they were throwing bricks at him, and he had to get the fuck out of Tennessee. This happened in Tennessee when all this shit happened, and the police officers they were offended by it, by New Jack, and they had to put disclaimers and everything saying that the views of New Jack and the Gangstas do not reflect Smoky Mountain Wrestling. D'Lo Brown was actually in this, which goddamn, he's gotten so old. Like I couldn't even recognize him at first. Like, is that D'Lo Brown? Nah, no. Like he looks so different from when I remember the last time seeing D'Lo Brown. But yeah, he was in this documentary about New Jack, which he was part of the Gangstas in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But anyways, let's talk about the ECW stuff. So New Jack, took his character to the next level with ECW. He'd bring weapons to the ring. He beat the shit out of people. Like it was his turf. It became his new home. And ECW, for those of you who don't know, ECW was Extreme Championship Wrestling. They were known for their hardcore matches and their hardcore, storylines that would go over the top. You had wrestlers such as Rob Van Dam, Sabu, The Sandman, fucking Tommy Dreamer. Like you had all those guys that made ECW, what it was. And back in the 90s, like they were considered like the best thing ever if you were a wrestling fan. I know a lot of people don't like the hardcore wrestling stuff, but it was pretty innovative for its time, and the audience loved it. Fans of ECW considered it like the next big thing to professional wrestling, which it was. And because of ECW, I mean, we would get the Attitude Era. I mean, that's what, put the WWF on the map was the Attitude Era. And, guys like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and all them, that was the best period of wrestling, But anyways, there was an incident that took place in 1997, I believe, or 96. But I believe it happened at the end of 97. But there was an incident called the Mass Transit Incident, which is probably one of the most notorious things that they bring up that New Jack did. So I'm going to try to explain the Mass Transit Incident to you guys. So Mass Transit was a wrestler. He was brought in with two midget wrestlers. One of them was a well-known midget wrestler known as Tiny the Terrible. And basically what happened was Mass Transit came to ECW. He came to Paul Heyman, and he wanted to be in the show because they had a show in Massachusetts. And Paul Heyman, being the crazy booker that he is, decided to, use Mass Transit because, they were in need of a wrestler. You see, there was supposed to be a tag team match. This was at a house show, and usually house shows are not taped. They're not live shows. They're not on television. They're basically just live events that people go to. And there was supposed to be a tag team match with the Gangstas, and Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten. And Axel Rotten didn't show up. He had family issues, so he couldn't make it to the show. So they needed a replacement, and Paul Heyman decided to go with Mass Transit because Mass Transit told Paul Heyman that he was, 21 years old and that he had experience because he was trained by Killer Kowalski. And the funny thing is, Killer Kowalski was actually at the show, and he could have easily, debunked, Mass Transit's story, but he never said anything. But anyways, before the match, Mass Transit actually was, he was showing lack of respect in the locker room because there's a such thing in professional wrestling called locker room etiquette, which means that you listen to the veterans. They get to decide how the match should go out. You don't get to decide how you should, like that's what he was doing. He was trying to, tell the wrestlers what they should do in their matches, what he's gonna do in the match. And, he just rubbed everybody the wrong way. And there was already tension to begin with. And that should tell you right there that this guy had no business being in the ring because he wasn't properly trained. Because when you're trained in professional wrestling, you're supposed to know about locker room etiquette and to show respect to the veterans. But, anyways, he went up to New Jack and he asked New Jack if he could cut him. And New Jack was, yeah, I'll cut you. I'll gladly do the honors for you. And I'll put it in Blue Meanie's words when he talks about this in a shoot interview. He said that New Jack was like the Leonardo da Vinci of blading. And for those of you who don't know what blading is or juicing is, I guess that's another term that they use, juice. Blading is where you're busted open with a razor blade. Like the razor is cut into pieces, and they wrap it up with tape, and you stick it in your mouth, or you have it, underneath your wrists. Like you take the razor blade and you make a small incision or a big incision, like right across your eyebrow, and you bleed. Well, they go to do the match, and they had it all planned out that he was supposed to be the meat. He was supposed to be the guy that takes the beatings and everything. He was supposed to blade. And New Jack took it upon himself to beat the ever-living shit out of this guy, and he cut him open with a fucking surgical scalp with a fucking piece of wood attached to it. He took a 3-inch scalp and just right across his forehead. Like he cut him so deep he cut through an artery, and there was lots of blood. There's footage of this, by the way, because someone actually recorded it, but it never aired on television, and that's for good reason too, because it's disgusting. But you can hear Mass Transit's father. His father was screaming in the background, saying, "In the fucking match, he's 17 years old." So yeah, he lied about his age too. He lied about his wrestling experience, and he lied about his age. So what ends up happening? They stop the match. New Jack picks up a mic and he's like, "I don't care if this motherfucker dies. I hate white people." Being New Jack, he was being New Jack. And what ended up happening was the police came and they wanted to press charges to him, which Mass Transit, he was given the middle finger. He was aware of what he was getting himself into, and he had no business being in the ring. Everybody has said that it's his fault, and it's not just New Jack's fault. New Jack did go a little bit too far, but that kid had no business being in a wrestling ring, especially with someone like New Jack, who is notorious for hurting people. But anyways, what happens is they go to courts. New Jack, of course, he gets acquitted for it because the kid admitted that he asked New Jack to cut him. And I can't believe this was actually taken to court. And it was like on television and everything. People were like, on the kid's side. Like his lawyer, New Jack's lawyer, thought, yes, we can win this case, but like they tried to offer him 5 years for what he did. He almost went to jail for 5 years. But of course, uh they ended up, pleading him not guilty. He pled not guilty and he won. New Jack won. And unfortunately, the kid ended up dying at the age of 21, which is kind of ironic because he lied about his age. But he died at the age of 21 from a bad gastro bypass surgery. That's a gastro bypass surgery that went wrong, and it killed him, took his life. But that's what led to the cancellation of ECW's very first pay-per-view. Guilty. I think it's. I don't remember the name of the pay-per-view. I think it was Guilty as Charged. I'm not really sure what the pay-per-view was called, but they were planning on having a pay-per-view, and the pay-per-view network decided to pull it because of this incident. And it's one of the most talked about incidents in the business, almost up there with, Chris Benoit and, all the other wrestling tragedies. But the next thing that they talk about in this documentary was, of course, Vic Grimes. For those of you who don't know, Vic Grimes, he was an ECW. He had a match with New Jack. I think it was a hardcore match. And it was at Guilty as Charged 2000. I think. I'm not really sure. Like, the dates is like, all, it's like when you put like black tape over it, it's like didacted in my mind because I can't think of the dates. I'm really tired here. So I'm going to try my best to skim through this. So what ended up happening was New Jack and Vic Grimes, they were supposed to fall off of a scaffold, which was about 30 feet, I think, or probably 10 feet. It was a small scaffold. It was about 10 feet, and they were supposed to fall together and land on the tables. Vic Grimes had second thoughts, and he didn't want to jump. So New Jack pulled him with him, and what ended up happening was Vic Grimes fell down with New Jack, which New Jack ended up landing on the table with his feet. But then Vic Grimes landed on New Jack's head on the floor. And what ended up happening was New Jack had his skull cracked. And, this side of I think it was the right side or left side of his eye. His eye went completely blind. And he, to this day, cannot see in that eye. And, it affected him. Like, it affected him to the point where he just didn't care anymore. Like, he didn't even care if he was going to die. But he would get his revenge when Vic Grimes Well, hang on. Let me slow down a bit. What ended up happening was, at first Vic Grimes apologized to New Jack. New Jack was cool with him at first, but then Vic Grimes started to brag to the locker room about, how, he fucked up New Jack. He beat him up. And New Jack was like, "No, motherfucker, you didn't beat me up. I fucked up." Which he did. He did fuck up. But nevertheless, they 2001 XPW had a show, and it was going to be Vic Grimes versus New Jack in a rematch, but it was a scaffold match, and it was 30 feet from the ring. Like, I think 30 or I'm not really sure of the numbers here. Fuck. But anyways, they were on a really big scaffold, and there was like 12 tables in the ring. If you search it on YouTube, you can find the match easily. Uh, New Jack basically bought a taser from a pawn shop, and he tasered Vic Grimes in the match. Like he tased him like 4 or 5 times, and then he threw him off the scaffold, and Vic Grimes lands not on the tables. He misses the tables and lands right on the rope on the ropes. Like he bounces off the ropes. Like when he lands, he ended up dislocating his ankle. I mean, he's lucky that he's alive. Like if he would have missed the ring, he would have been dead. Or if he had hit his head on the turnbuckle, yeah. And that to me was uncalled for. I mean, yeah, the guy fucking pissed you off because he bragged about ending you, but that's just no way to fucking go that far to just throw him off the scaffold and fucking kill him. That's no excuse. But, New Jack didn't really care. Like New Jack is a guy that has no sympathy whatsoever. He has no empathy. He doesn't care. He even said it. He didn't care. He had no love loss for Vic Grimes. He didn't care if he lived. He didn't care if he died. He just didn't like the motherfucker, and he wanted him to die. That's what he said in his own words. But then they talk about another incident that he had with Gypsy Joe. Gypsy Joe was a old school wrestler. He had been in the business for a very long time, and he was like 72 years old. Like you can look at the match. He had a match with Gypsy Joe, and what he did, he basically beat up an old man. Like that's what the whole match was. Just him beating the shit out of an old man. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's fucked up beyond belief. And the last thing that they talked about in the documentary was the stabbing incident. New Jack basically was wrestling a guy known as William Lane. And William Lane was a new wrestler. He was a green wrestler. He went to this promotion called Thunder Wrestling Federation. And he basically stabbed the kid, just stabbed him 9 times. And what ended up happening was New Jack got arrested for that. But the guy, promised he basically told New Jack that if he trained him or, turned this into an angle with him, then he would drop the charges. And New Jack agreed to it. And the kid basically dropped the charges on New Jack, but New Jack just fucking left Florida. And where they end the documentary is, he says he's controversial. He's real. New Jack is real, and that Jerome Young is dead. That's basically the way that they put it. That he's New Jack and he'll forever be New Jack. And they explained why, all these other major promotions like WWE wouldn't touch him because he's controversial. And, and that's the thing with professional wrestling. With professional wrestling, it's a very tough business to get into because you're basically putting your body at risk to the point of injury or paralysis. Like you could end up paralyzing your body completely, like poor draws, which I hope that they one day cover that because that was just that was very sad. But New Jack took it to an extreme level, and that's all he's ever known for was his hardcore style, his character. And he's been vilified over his actions, what he's done. What he's done, people can be considered as assaults. Like, he had no reason to intentionally hurt people. Like, yeah, he had a shitty childhood, but that doesn't give you an excuse to, hurt people, to intentionally hurt people or try to kill them. And I'll even put this in the words of Bret Hart. And Bret Hart says it best. A good wrestler is someone that doesn't intentionally hurt you or doesn't intentionally hurt the other wrestler. But I mean, that's basically how it is. He wasn't a great wrestler. He was only controversial because of his shit, and that doesn't make you a great wrestler. But I don't think New Jack really cares what we think or, what anybody thinks. He's New Jack, and that's that. I mean, that's really all you can say. I mean, I do like New Jack to an extent. I hate to say that. I mean, he used one of my favorite rap songs, Natural Born Killers by Dr. Dre and Ice Cube. That's one of my favorite rap songs of all time. But I guess I just find it fascinating, I guess. His story is fascinating and his controversy is fascinating. But looking at him on a more personal level and, as a human being, that's where I sort of draw the line because I just know he's not a good person. But, I mean, I can't really say as, a professional on the professional level because I've never worked with him. I've never been a wrestler. To basically be able to compete in the ring with him. I've never done that. So I can't really say how he is on a professional level, just, on a personal level, looking at the controversies and everything that he's done. So, I mean, that's really all there is to him. I mean, he couldn't really work. I mean, he just fell off balconies and hit people with crutches and stuff. That's not really a great wrestler, in my opinion. He's not even in the league of Bret Hart or Shawn Michaels. Because when you think of great wrestlers, that's who you think of. You think of Bret Hart. You think of Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock. All of those sound like great wrestlers because they could actually work. But New Jack just wasn't that great. And that, the controversies will forever tarnish him and vilify him. So, I mean, that's that, people. And I think that's the takeaway from this documentary. Like, a lot of people want to uh, find, enjoyment out of controversy. They see an entertainment aspect. I get that. But you can't fucking sit there and tell me that, this guy was such a great wrestler, such a prominent figure in professional wrestling. You just cannot convince me of that. This guy's a criminal. He fucking hurt people and tried to kill them. And that there's nothing prominent about that. The guy should be in jail for everything that he's done. But I mean, and here's another thing, people. I'm not racist at all. I have always respected people of color. I've always respected all races. But when it comes to shit like this, I can't. I can't defend it. I can't defend the fact that you have criminals in this world and they deserve to be in jail. That does not make me a racist whatsoever. I mean, if you do a crime, you go to jail. That's just that. And you can't just use the race card to benefit you. You can't. But that's just how people look at it nowadays. And that you can't say that, oh, they're a criminal. You can't say that, about anybody that has a harsh life. You just it's so crazy just how this world is. But that's my review of the Dark Side of the Ring, Season 2, Episode 3, The Life and Crimes of New Jack. I want to hear your guys' opinions on this. I want your thoughts on this. I want to know what you think in the comment section. I liked the episode. I liked the way they interviewed everybody. And they do a really good job of interviewing New Jack and, getting his perspective of things instead of making everything one-sided. But, my takeaway from this episode was, New Jack is not a great person. He's not this great wrestler. But anyways, I'm just going to wrap everything up now. I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and hopefully next week when I review, I think next week they're going to be reviewing Owen Hart. I believe that's going to be the next one. Oh, I'm dreading it. I am definitely dreading the Owen Hart episode. Oh boy. Like, I am going to be crying over that. But I'll let you guys know if I plan on reviewing that or not. If you guys want to see me review that, let me know in the comments section. Also, follow me on Twitter at Canvas Pirates. And that's really it. You guys have a great night.